mulligan is, right, Taplines listener? It's a golf term for when you fuck up and everyone feels bad for you because you suck at golf, so they just kind of let you go again, taking a stroke on your scorecard. I think. I don't golf. Not a golfer. Where was I going with this? Oh, right. There are no mulligans in the beer business, of course, not with money on the line, but every once in a while, there are second chances. Today, we're talking to a guy who got one. George Esquivel is the co-founder of Four Corners Brewing Company in Dallas, Texas. In 2018, he and his co-founders sold their brewery to Constellation Brands, which had muscled its way into the then-hot American craft brewing industry 3 years prior with its jaw-dropping, eye-popping, billion-dollar acquisition of Ballast Point Brewing Company. Less than a year after Four Corners came aboard, Modelo's parent company took the equivalent of a corporate mulligan on San Diego's Ballast Point, selling it off for reported dimes on the dollar. From there, to hear Esquivel tell it, the writing was kind of on the wall for Four Corners. Constellation clearly didn't understand the nuances of the craft beer market and didn't really have to learn because Especial was ascendant. Of course, still is. The Texas craft brewery languished within the corporate portfolio. That might have been the end of the story, but in 2023, after 5 years within the belly of Big Beer's big golden beast, Esquivel and his partners got a rare second chance. They took control of Four Corners back from their one-time corporate overlords at Constellation and decided to give it another go as an independent brewery. It's a hell of a choice in a market like this, and he's hella candid about why they made it. It's George Esquivel, it's Four Corners, it's crafting a big beer buyback, and it's all right here, right now, on VinePair's Taplines. All right, George Esquivel, welcome to Taplines.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, come on. It's an opportunity for us to hear from you. George, where are you joining us from? I mean, we're in the virtual Tapline studio, of course, but you are physically somewhere. Where are you?
I am here in Dallas, Texas, born and raised as a Dallasite. A few of us left, but still holding on strong to the Dallas stream.
Yeah. Oh, is it a Dallasite? Is that what you say? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dallison.
Dallas. That sounds really strange. Yeah, Dallasites, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, because a Kansan is someone from Kansas, right? That's how they refer to themselves.
Is that what
I
they
think?
are? Yeah.
I don't Jayhawk. I guess they're Jayhawks or whatever. Yeah. All right. Well, enough about Kansas. We're not here to talk about Kansas. We're not even here to talk about Texas per se, although it will come up. We're here to talk about beer. George, you're joining us today to talk about a very important moment, I think, in the modern beer history landscape, which is, of course, what we focus on here at Taplines. We're going to be talking today about, the trajectory of your brewery, joining one of the biggest macro brewers in the American brewing industry, and then exiting from its clutches or from the fold a few years later. But before we get to any of that, I want to talk a little bit about, and I think listeners would love to hear a little bit about your beer career. I mean, you weren't always a co-founder of a craft brewery. When did you first start getting involved in beer as a drinker, I suppose, and then as a business?
I started drinking beer really
at
early.
21, obviously.
21,
right,
exactly, yeah.
right at 21, yeah.
With a little bit of pre-experience to 21, but yeah,
that's right.
Since legal drinking, and at the time, aging myself, I mean, it was floating from like 18 to 19 to 21, and I was always missing it by like 6 months on my birthday.
Oh, it was like running away from you.
It was running away from me. It was always like 6 months away, and it was so it was chasing it. But again, just drinking beer with the buddies and that was it. I was played music throughout like high school to college and that sort of stuff. I still do, but at that time I was like playing in bands a lot, so it was just always kind of hanging around bars and that sort of thing. And beer just kind of went along with it.
Sure. What were the big brands?
Oh, it was just a macro, Miller Lite time, But this is as we got into kind of the 90s, me and actually my partner, Steve Porcari, we played. That's how we came to know each other, playing tunes. And we were a house band on Tuesday nights at Flying Saucer in Dallas, and then we were on Thursday nights at Flying Saucer in Fort Worth. So Flying Saucer is, it was kind of really early stage, have a world of beers. They would host Michael Jackson, the beer hunter, for
Oh, wow.
beer session. So got to meet him and just really kind of got my mind open to the world of beer. And different styles and that sort of thing. It was just a cool part of the journey. But as far as we kind of got into the craft beers at that time, the Widmer Brothers. Let's see if we could get
Out of Oregon. Yeah, sure.
Oregon. Yeah, exactly. Red Hook Ale. If we could get Red Hook, that was awesome. Goose Island was early stage.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so those were some of the cool brands at that time. And I just I started to really dig the I just call it better beer, whether it was European beer or or American craft. But the American craft stuff really started to get to kind of get the juices flowing, and it was really about the storylines behind it. I've always felt that beer is beyond the beer. The beer is the beer, but then what's the story behind it? And I was always
Sure.
Intrigued by that. So we were digging beers, we were learning about beer, and we were hanging out one night, and we'd always watched, we'd always seen from afar like the long shot contest from Sam Adams. You familiar with that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it's a long shot contest. We always thought, man, that's really cool. And, back then, Sam Adams was doing some really cool stuff. They were brewing they brewed a 4-pack of the founding fathers. There was ginger beers and root beers and 4 different beers in a pack. And I thought, man, that's just wild what they're doing with beer. And American brewers are doing just some really wacky stuff with beer. And I thought it was just fascinating. There was an ad that came on for the long shot contest, and we had seen it a couple of years prior, and I thought it might be kind of cool to do that. Bought one of those goofy, Mr. Beer kits off the TV and brewed our first
Mr. Beer, man. That's where so many stories that we've told on this show that our guests have come on. Mr. Beer is a central figure in so many of these episodes, man. Okay, so you got a Mr. So you had no brewing experience at that
Zero.
point.
No, none at all. I didn't. None of us had worked for a brewery, worked for a distributor, any of that. My career is in consumer packaged goods stuff, like food marketing. I spent the early part of my career in advertising, and then was working kind of more, call it client side for a manufacturer of food and stuff. And then so I had food. And so I always looked at it as like, okay, it's food, it's fresh stuff, and it has a story to it, everything that is. But no brewing experience whatsoever. Really out of hobby.
Around
really,
when? Sorry to interrupt. Around when? Years wise, like when are we talking here? When did you guys decide to throw your hat in the ring with the long shot contest?
I'd say learning, kind of and like really getting into beer, probably that would be mid 90s to the late 90s, and then about 2002, probably 2002, 2004 at the latest, but it was probably 2002 first batch of beer. Yeah.
And then, how was it? Any good?
It was horrible. It was every once in a while we go back and go like, hey, what did screw up? Well, probably there's so many opportunities for a screw up of that beer. And that's, and Steve, he got a whole lot better at brewing than I did. He built a, kind of a all grain system, and the whole thing is still in his garage. It's funny. But he got a whole lot better and just more adept at the brewing side of things. But through this process, there's brewing process is 3 to 4 hours. It's a lot of time to kind of bullshit and figure out, like what if, type of scenarios. What started happening around Dallas at that time, in the late, call it mid 2000s to 2008, 9, craft was really kind of getting cranked up. It was certainly cranked up across the U.S. It was getting, some energy kind of in Austin. but Dallas still only had two brewers in the North Texas area. And that was, it was Raw Brewing and Franconia Brewing that was up in McKinney. And yeah, I just looked at it. It's like, man, we're a top 5 major metropolitan market. Why is it that we only have two brewers in this market? Doesn't make sense. And around that time there were some homebrew contests and that sort of thing that were happening, and we had entered one and performed really well with a couple of beers that we had, and they were like, I mean, it was small. There were 5-6 brewers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. We were serving beer and our band played, it was like, it was roots, man. And, I always say, like, anybody who says that they were there, they weren't there. Yeah. Unless you were brewing beer, you probably weren't.
Okay. So this is the late 2000s at this point, and you guys have started to dial in the recipes. The liquid is tasting good. When does it dawn on you that, oh man, we can do this? Like there's a lane here.
Yeah, it was in and around that time. It was, I guess, like 2009 or 2009 for sure. Started getting a lot of energy around the kind of the local homebrew scene was kind of robust. And it was just a matter of time. There was one signature event. It's called Brew Riot. Happened down in kind of one of the neighborhoods, and you kind of looked around. It's like, okay, man, there's a lot of people here who are loving the beer, loving the craft beer. I mean, just the scene, right? The vibe.
Yep.
I felt that was really right. At that time, I was working for a company, a dairy company, and I went to Albuquerque for some business, and as I was exiting the airport, there was one of those little pony mag, those little publications, right?
Like the free publications or whatever.
Free publications, yeah. And I had something to do with beer. I just grabbed it and I put it in my in my case, and then but I was looking over it later. And I realized, like, okay, here's like Albuquerque to Santa Fe has 4 breweries, and I was blown away. I was like, okay, this market can sustain 4 breweries. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I went out and checked out. I was checking out breweries or kind of craft bars by that time, and I went to visit a couple of these Marble and I don't think I made Santa Fe. I can't remember which the other one was, but I was like, okay, it doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be you just have to get started, and so we came kind of came together. Started to noodle an idea, put together a business plan in about 6 months, and raised our first round of capital, and ordered equipment, and off we went. And none of us came from beer world. Really weren't kind of keen to all the the legalities of everything and just how to deal with all this stuff. We were self-distributed for the first 2.5 years. But it was a learning experience. But I've always, it's interesting. I've always believed that brewing is just a figure it out business. You just, whether you're brewing at home, you just figure it out, and you kind of make your own path. So, luckily I was, partnered with, some folks who were, in their professional world are really good at other stuff that I wasn't. That finance is one of them. My partner Greg Leftwich is, he's a banker by trade, and then Steve, had the kind of the brewing, the operations stuff to figure out, and I was handling sales and marketing. So we were kind of bringing our disciplines to the table, and I think that was a real game changer for what we were doing.
Yeah. What was the fundraising environment like at the end of the aughts? Like, were banks throwing loans around, or was it pure like friends and family, like equity play?
First round was friends and family, and friends and family. Maybe I think we raised maybe $500,000. And then that circle got a little bit bigger second round. So it was, but I say year one, everybody's like, what are you doing? You're starting a brewery. Okay. It sounds kind of cool. By year 2 to 3, there was energy around craft. And so people were looking to play a little more. Dallas is a very friendly town in terms of, deals and business. and there's so much money in this town, it's ridiculous.
They made a whole television show about it.
They made it exactly right. And there's no joke, man. There's a lot of cash in this town. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But the environment is really friendly for entrepreneurship, and continues to be. But yeah, so the environment was pretty good. We ended up getting a small business loan so we launched our brewery in 12. We thought we'd be in our first home, which was like this converted big rig shop. It was hard. I mean, there's no dock. I'll tell you the craziest story.
It sounds cool, but it does not sound functional. Yeah,
it does not functional. It was cool, and it was in this kind of really transitional part of town, as breweries are, and the whole bit. And so kind of the three legs of the stool for us was like, okay, just the fact that there's a brewery and craft brewer in Dallas, that was really new. Where we were, where we were located was kind of news. Like, okay, why there? Because that's a up and coming area, and it's new. There's like new energy coming into the space, and then just about beer and brewing and that sort of stuff. It got us a lot of notoriety. Yeah. So it was but the first round, friends, family, little outside that circle, and but we were in our first home. We thought we'd be there for 10 years, outgrew it in really 3. And by year 5, we were going, okay, we really need to find a new place to go.
Yep.
And so we ended up at our current home. That was a big bet for us to stretch out that far.
And certainly.
We did that in 17. So 12 to 17 was
You guys were growing like a weed, man. Yeah.
Yeah, well, man, the environment was great. We were brewing beer, and we were in keg format only for about a year and a half. We went to can format.
Really?
Yeah. Went to can format in 14. And that really just took off. And we were getting, I got a call from like a Kroger buyer back then. And it's like, hey, we'd like to have your beer. I was like, okay. Them, Whole Foods, it was just like they were calling, like, hey, we'd like to get your beer in here, blah, blah, blah. And I was
buyers were calling you, man.
Insane,
talk about a different era. My goodness.
No kidding. It was magical that way. It was like, the more energy we put into it, the more we get back out of it. And they merchandise it for us the whole bit. It was like, man, those days are far and long gone. But they were fun times for sure.
But very, very formative for Four Corners, and I'm sure for so many other brewers that are listening to this. I mean, that was of that moment. I mean, that's a I'm on the media side of the business. I don't brew myself, but so much of my reporting is tracks with what you're describing. I mean, there was just real pull in the marketplace for what you were brewing, and what this movement such as it is. Was starting to sort of carry forth to the American consumer, man. Like, people wanted it. People were going after it. Wow.
That was really the motivation for us. The motivation was not, hey, let's, open a brewery and try to retire.
Get rich. Yeah, right.
Get rich. I mean, that's the impossible dream. But what we wanted to do, we felt like culturally there was something missing here in this town, and that we had seen, and we had traveled to Portland, if we were on business, wherever, any other town, up and down the West Coast or Denver. It's like, man, this the scene is really vibrant, it's thriving, and it's the community fabric is kind of built around this, and we don't have that here, and that's what we wanted to put in place. So we were successful doing that really quick. Just along through that was building, brand value, and so we had moved over to our new space. It was shiny, brand new. We had new equipment, and just had a bigger footprint to do all the things that we wanted to do as brewers. And in and around that was we opened the doors in November of 17 in our current home, but it was a new home back then. got a visit from M&A guy from Constellation Brands, one of our distributors, and say, "Hey, would you take a meeting with him?" I was like, "Sure, I'll take a meeting with him." I thought it was going to be a very much a meet and greet.
Sure.
Hey, keep in touch. We'll see how it goes. We're just opened this place, and we're in debt to our above our heads, and wish us luck. And but yeah, they had been scoping. Obviously they had interest in craft at that time. They had purchased Ballast. I think about a year and a half before.
Yeah, December 2015. I want to say that deal closed.
Okay, so right 2 years prior to us, they did the Ballast deal. They also bought Funky Buddha out of Florida.
Yes,
and they had their scope on something kind of in the Southwest. They had asked several folks in their Gold Network distributors of who would you look at. They kind of pointed at us. So they came in. They'd done their homework already. I mean, we had a handshake deal done, and seemed like that afternoon. It was bizarre.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I say that it felt that fast, but it was. I mean, within weeks, it was. We were dealing. Yeah.
That's all right. Let me leave that for a second because
Sure.
we're going to come back to this. Obviously, this is the crux of the matter. But I wanted to one more question about you described. You had been out to the Pacific Northwest. You had seen the vibrant craft beer, craft brewing culture, and the way it was sort of changing cities like Portland and Seattle and other spots around the region. And Dallas, didn't have as much of that when Four Corners founded. You said there were only 2 breweries in the late aughts, and even Albuquerque could sustain 4 breweries. This gets at, I think, I'm not a Dallas native. I'm not even a Texas native. So I'm going to ask you to stand in for your people, for the Texans who might be listening to this. Dallas is a very unique place. I mean, all of Texas is a unique place, but Dallas within Texas is quite a unique city. As you say, big city, ton of money. It does not necessarily seem at first glance to me, an outsider, to comport with the craft brewing culture that was then emergent in hotbeds like the Pacific Northwest. What was the uptake when Four Corners and other brewers started to really evangelize this type of culture in Dallas? Like people seem to be into the beer. What was your finding as you started? I mean, obviously you had a lot of success selling the beer. What was the culture that emerged around craft brewing in Dallas? It wasn't the same as in the Pacific Northwest, I'm sure, but it was its own thing.
Well, there's a lot of young people in this town. So there were microbreweries in the '90s that didn't sustain very well.
Like brew pubs or like proper breweries?
Breckenridge had a brewery here.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a
I
restaurant.
didn't even know that. Yeah.
It was short lived. I mean, and again, even for me, who was kind of learning, it was like still a little bit outside, the wheelhouse. So there were a handful. I'd say maybe 6 or so, maybe 8. Microbreweries in the area, but nothing of scale. When we launched, part of us was like, okay, we're looking for culture here. Let's define what the culture is. So we were partnering with, at that time also, we were partnering with some really cool kind of, food centric people. So, Texas barbecue was really coming on strong as a thing. And I mean, Texas barbecue has just become a thing. And there were, the Texas Monthly Top 50, barbecue guys, and so we were partying with these people.
Yeah.
Daniel Vaughn, who was the barbecue editor, released his book at our brewery.
Cool.
Jose Ralad, who was the Texas Monthly taco editor, is a good friend of ours, and so
that's right. The most enviable job in media. Yeah.
No kidding, man. These guys, it's amazing. If I knew that was a career path, I would have might have done that instead. And we're just hanging around with these really other just talented people, and they're starting their thing, and we're doing our thing, and so it felt like it was just like this. We're all kind of chasing after something, and so why not partner together? So we continue to do that in different ways, but that was part of it too. So it became it's like, okay, people can come in to get have some education on beer, but there's kind of this safe environment. It's like, well, I like barbecue too, and so and so's going to be there, so we pull in the crowds that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And, got things motivated. But it's I'd say we got a lot of people moving into North Texas from outside, from the West Coast. We got people moving here from all over the place who have an affinity for craft beer already. They're kind of into it, so
Yep.
there's just wasn't an outlet for it. And we opened. There were already. It seems like everybody had the same idea around the same time. There were a handful of brewers that opened, within a year, either before or after us. And
Yeah, yeah.
there are 63, I think, now in North Texas.
Wow.
Insane, man.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is going to grow. Hey, one day we're going to have 30 plus breweries. I never thought we'd get north of 65. Just
Yeah,
really
yeah. You said you were self-distributed for the first 2.5 years. You said you were in kegs for the first year and a half or so before you started packaging. What was the distributor uptake like? I mean, Texas, you've dealt with them, and many of them are your business partners, and I wouldn't expect you to speak ill of them, although you're always welcome to on this show. But from the outside looking in, and as a reporter who's covered the space, Texas's middle tier is notoriously militant and is not necessarily as amenable. I mean, to the extent that any beer distributors are amenable to change, the Texas distributor core is not typically thought of as one of the more sort of forward thinking states for distribution. Distribution, obviously, an enormous linchpin for a brewery like Four Corners that is growing like a weed, as we said midway through last decade. What was when you did switch to distribution? What was that conversation like? Where your partners understand it right off the rip? Was there education that you felt like you were doing in the middle tier? Were they getting calls from buyers at Kroger? What was the dynamic in the middle tier like when you started interacting with it?
So we were self-distributed, yes, in kegs, and at that time, that was kind of the norm. It's like, okay, go figure out which are going to be your lead beers. Years after we had launched into I'd say by 2015 or 20, like they were opening with canning lines right out the gate. And I was like, wow, it was just, just going for it. It was right for it. So, if I had to go back and do it all again, we would have did the same thing. But we had to decide pretty quickly. It's like, look, are we in the distribution business or are we in the beer making business? And because it's hard to self-distribute.
And you knew what the distribution business looked like a little bit because of your experience in CPG. You know what it looks like. Obviously, CPG does not have the middle tier enshrined in law like the beer industry and the alcohol industry does, but you understand that the logistical, sort of hurdles compound when you start talking about packaging and placing beer at retail.
Yeah, but so that to me, the approach is very CPG because I just put it in. It's still we kind of come full circle. I knew that from delivering beer in my car was like I'd go deliver a slim of beer, right?
Yeah,
I'd have to go clean a line, deliver a beer, give them a tap, which is extra money, and then I don't know when that thing is done. I had to go back there and check in and then go get my keg back and then beg them for another. I was okay, this is ridiculous. When I could walk into a C store at that time and sell equivalent or better of cases of beer, and they would text me when they want more. I was like, we're going to go do that, man. That's it. So we're still very 80-20 off-prem for this brand.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And so, this concept of building it on handles is like, that's not, there's, in terms of velocity and just power of the brand, CPG is where it's at.
Yeah.
And this is how, that's how it's, that's all, that's the world I knew. It's like, okay, there's power in those cases on the shelf and it was really ripe. So
the
again,
billboard,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Building it on the handles is a great. I love that phrase, and the idea is that, for listeners who aren't aware, maybe aren't as familiar with the beer, the inner workings of the beer industry. There's a long-standing truism, I suppose, although there are of course exceptions to the rule, and it sounds like Four Corners to some extent was one of them. But the idea is the brand is built in the on-premise and the business is built in the off-premise, right? This idea that like you can't just launch a brand as, beer brand as CPG. You got to be in the bars, you got to be in the restaurants, you got to be doing education. And as you say, I mean, it sounds like Four Corners, sort of took its own path in that, like in that dynamic, and you guys were successful in in packaging. But I do love, like, because there are so many instances where we do have people on the show who are like, we tried to build in the on-premise and we just couldn't get interest. We couldn't be positioned in the way that we hoped to be positioned. And then they actually, other brewers would go and find obviously more value in the volume, in the off-premise, but also more opportunity for brand building too. So it's not always true, even though it is a piece of received wisdom that everyone talks about in the beer industry.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's a lot of energy, and so with a limited,
totally.
You got limited resources, man. You got to kind of pick your path, and I think we chose well early at this stage. Could really use a lot of that energy that's on prem, and but we're again, we're still very much 80-20 on our mix.
Yeah. So we jumped the gun a little. We sped forward, but now we've arrived. You've indulged me for a couple follow-up questions, but now let's go to what we mentioned earlier. You've moved into the new space. You've got this beautiful gleaming facility. Ballast Point gets acquired in 2015 by Constellation Brands. Constellation Brands is a relatively newcomer in the American beer business. Listeners who don't know their beer history or haven't brushed up should be reminded that, it was only in 2013 that the Department of Justice compelled Anheuser-Busch InBev to spin off its U.S. Grupo Modelo business to a third-party corporation in order to close that deal. In order to bless that deal, they had to get rid of Corona rights and Modelo rights and a bunch of other rights. But that was a stipulation of that deal. So in 2013, Constellation Brands is a mid-major wine and spirits conglomerate out of Western New York. They have very little interest in the beer business, business interest. And all of a sudden they become the stewards of Corona and Modelo, and they see. They're smart folks over there. They see which way the wind is blowing. 2013 is 2 years removed from Anheuser-Busch's acquisition of Goose Island that would have been in 2011, which kicked off the feeding frenzy that we saw last decade as strategic partners, as macro brewers, all decided, well, we need a piece of this business because this is the part of the business that's growing, and they went out and bought craft brewers. I say that to say this. You knew at that time that acquisition was very much a thing. By 2017, you kind of could see the way, sort of the business was going. We'd seen at that point, Constellation had already acquired 2. Anheuser-Busch was probably 6 or 7 in. I think they would acquire 11 all in. Molson Coors had their 4, which they just spun off not too long ago. So you could see this stuff happening. What was your, you took the meeting with the Constellation M&A guy. What was your personal thought on like acquisition? Was this something that you were interested in when you started the business? Was this something that, like, oh man, like this is crazy. Maybe this is a route for us. Were you opposed to it at first and just wanted to hear him out? Like, what was your personal attitude, you and your partners, to the extent that you remember, how you felt at that time? How did you feel when you first took the meeting with Constellation?
I felt really, felt great that anybody was even interested in talking to us, because it's like, okay, and really from just a standpoint of like, what is their perceived, value for what we're doing, right? we weren't very big. We were pushing, 150,000 100,000 cases. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, small brewery and
Yeah.
relatively small compared to
Big
the
for
volume.
you though.
Big for us,
The biggest you'd ever been.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's an absolute fact. Yeah. But yeah, and the kegers look really good and all that kind of stuff. So, but yes, I was really curious. Like, okay, what are they perceiving as value for?
Mm,
I knew we were building it, but I didn't feel like it was fully baked.
mm.
So it's really interesting to get somebody's perspective on brands, especially someone of that caliber that has these really big brands in their portfolio. And so yeah, we took the meeting, and it just went well. I mean, it made sense because we had talked about, hey, what if blah blah blahs, but it's never, you can't plan to get acquired.
Right.
People ask me that all
Right.
the time, so you can't. That's just nonsense. But um, we knew we didn't want an ABI deal. It's like, they just didn't kind of feel right. I feel we're going to be put in a toy box and just kind of put aside.
Sure. Sure.
And others, and we're like, maybe Heineken, I don't know. And then, but I was watching from afar, just at Constellation brands. I was like, okay, these are brands that make sense. These are Mexican brands.
Yep.
Performing really well, getting stronger all the time. They're investing in the brands. They're they're going beyond the beer. It's beer is almost like the beer quality was kind of secondary. It's really more lifestyle, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
Constellation does extremely well. So and again, just from afar, it was like, if there was interest, it would be them. And lo and behold, they had a meeting, offered a meeting, and so we took it. But yeah, you got to so there's some excitement around it. And then there's always this reality is like, okay, this won't be our baby anymore. It's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
This thing, we get to be involved, but it's not really ours. And,
Yep.
but yeah, leading up to that, what was exciting is, look, we have, you're in in a family of brands where there's investment, and you can kind of follow behind, Modelo and Pacifico and following behind these brands. And we also have this craft side of us with Ballast Point that has an infrastructure to that, a team built around it. And
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get this best of both worlds, from a brand standpoint. We had one put a flag down here on trying to appeal to Latinos. The Hispanic population in Texas is the majority. It will be and continue to be for the next several decades. To the point where legal drinking age consumers are going to be 60% of the population. So if you look at that, just that demographic. And so it's important for us to go there, now. So that's the value it built was around that type of proposition.
Yep.
And it worked on paper. So this really works really well under Constellation brands, and it works well for us to achieve what we wanted to do. Is really just take that to its take it to its true potential, is to
Yeah.
really go for that, man. And so I was really excited about the proposition,
Yeah.
going into
Yeah.
we had a meeting in November of 17. The deal was they turned us inside out and upside down, through to get to a deal, actually in July of 2018.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you already with Gold Network distributors at that point, or was there realignment after you guys came on to Constellation?
That made it pretty easy. We were minus just a couple.
Yeah.
We were already aligned with the Gold Network, so that made it pretty easy.
Oh yeah, almost turnkey. I'm sure everyone was happy about that.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
one. Yeah, our first. You had asked about distributors earlier, and I don't think I even answered that. So yeah, the distributors they were pretty keen. Yeah, once they started getting this energy, and when ABI and and Constellation are interested in craft, then that gets they're interested as well. So by the time we got to this point, the distributors were pretty keen to it. There are a few, man. Like there's a couple of distributors that said, I don't know what this craft thing is about. I don't like it, but we'll take on the brands.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, cool. Great. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
thanks,
Right. Yeah.
thanks for your enthusiastic partnership.
Sounds great. Man. Sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Constellation, you guys got a deal done by June 2018 after talks start November 17. It moves fast. Was there any concern, George? I mean, we had 20, 30 episodes ago on this show, we had Dick Cantwell on, who's the co-founder of Elysian Brewing in Seattle. And his experience in Seattle, which is a much different city than Dallas, of course, was quite awful after the deal got announced. The city really, and he dissented on the deal somewhat famously, like his two co-founders outvoted him and went with the sale. But so he was not gung-ho on it, in other words. And people didn't understand that necessarily. And when it did get announced, drinkers who felt really close connection to the brand, to the brewery, which had been operating at that point for like 20 years, for 95 or so, up until 2015, they were mad. People were pissed. People thought, you're a fucking sellout. Dick Cantwell tells this terrific story. I mean, an upsetting story, but terrific story. He calls them hate tourists, where people would come to the Elysian brew pubs, order a pint of beer just to dump it on the bar. And it's like this poor fucking bartender is like, I have nothing to do with this deal, man. Like, I'm making whatever an hour plus tips. Like, now I got to clean this shit up. Anyway, I say that to say there was a lot of animosity in certain corners of the craft brewing industry, certainly, but then in just sort of the broader craft brewing or craft beer enthusiasts community, which at this point was quite large, towards breweries that quote unquote sold out, right? That put themselves up or went through an acquisition. Were you worried about that? Did you experience that with Four Corners? I mean, again, Dallas's culture is much different than Seattle's. What was that dynamic like for you guys as you considered this deal?
No, it was we understood it. I mean, Ballast had gone through the same thing, and we had talked with those guys, as we were kind of talking through this, this deal. They got, Legion got it, got the business, and so did Ballast. Everybody else, and we knew that was a real thing, but we also knew that it's a small group of really vocal people who
assholes,
and who just want to make noise. So and that was it. Certainly the people who would come to our tap room and were hanging out, they weren't pouring beer, on the counter. So we knew it was going to be, the noise is going to be there. I think if there's backlash at all, it was kind of there's some on-prem, folks who were like, we're not going to carry, we only carry independent craft beer,
independent.
Independent craft. So hey, so be it. Rock on. We got. We're over here doing our thing. So it was a real thing. It was noisy, and we moved past it pretty quickly. Again, but we didn't have that. It's that sense of I don't know. The environment wasn't as it is on the coast to that degree, and it was just amazing. I was like, we get these like, oh, fucking sellouts and this and that, and I look who it's like, these people aren't even in Texas, man. They're not.
Right.
Nothing about.
They're posting from Maryland or whatever.
Exactly. You know zero about who I am, who we are, what we do. Nothing. All you see is a headline, and it's, for me, it's like, man, I hope you feel better. I hope that makes you.
Yeah, right.
I hope that's fulfilling for 15 seconds, and you're on to the next. Yeah. So, there's some sense of that. I can tell you this though. I mean, we were. Back, the fact that we tell I'd say people of influence, whether those are retailers or distributors or whomever, it's like, hey, we are independent again. That is meaningful. It is meaningful to people because, it's not the same environment that it was in 17.
Sure.
And it's there are more challenges to it. So I know our at being out in market, at HEBs and Kroger, and just talking, it's like, oh, okay, wow, that's really it's I don't know if that's admirable, but they're favorable towards it.
Well, there's a validation there, right? I mean, it was easy to be not easy. Nothing is easy about the brewing business, but there was certainly tailwinds in 2016, 2017 that have since shifted to headwinds for the industry. So, the fact that you guys did decide to buy the brand back or to get the brand back from Constellation in the face of those headwinds, I think speaks volumes to me, at least, and I imagine to the business partners in the other tiers, that you guys believe in the brand. I mean, it would have been easy for you guys to walk away at that point, right? Be like, hey, man, you took the hot potato. Sucks for you. Best of luck, But no, yeah. Before we get to taking back the brand, I wanna talk a little bit about your time under the folds of under the umbrella of Constellation. We've talked a lot on this show. We've been lucky with a bunch of other guests to talk about being within the Anheuser-Busch, operation as a craft brewery that was acquired. Goose Island, Dick from Elysian. We've had some perspective from a few others as well. I never had the pleasure of hearing what it was like to operate or to try to operate within Constellation Brands at this critical juncture, this stretch of, I mean, you were there for Constellation Brands emergence as a legitimate third contender to the Anheuser-Busch InBev / Molson Coors duopoly, such as it was. I mean, all of a sudden, Pabst is off doing whatever the fuck Pabst is doing, and Heineken USA is busy trying to understand what they just paid $1 billion for with Lagunitas, and still hasn't figured it out, by the way. But Constellation Brands goes from, as I mentioned earlier, a mid-major wine and spirits portfolio to a legitimate contender in the American brewing business with the hottest brands in Modelo and Corona in the mass market. You were inside that from a very different perspective. You're bringing a Latino-oriented craft brewery brand to this business, to this corporation. You sold it to the Constellation folks in 2018. What was your experience like, sort of within the beast?
I'd say overall.
Sorry, that's a very broad question. I'm sure.
No. I'm grateful for that opportunity, and it's not beyond dollars. It was amazing to understand how they think about brands, how they approach them, how they the amount of energy and consumer insights that they have at their disposal that really translates down to what they're doing from a brand standpoint. And Modelo became a rockstar brand within those 5 years that we were there. And I was blown away at just of how they approach the business. They're incredibly smart people working on that business. They get the best of the best, and so from just to kind of get the perspective of how they manage big brands is really cool. And I'd worked with again, CPG is my world, but I've never worked with a company that big. I always worked for kind of mid-tier CPG brands, strong ones, but this is like, okay, this thing is. They are on fire right now with some really cool brands in the house and investing in them. And the processes that were in place to kind of manage this big beast of a business that they were chasing after, or they have in their hands and still growing, was really cool. And I think everyone, part of the appeal of doing the deal is like, okay, look, it's great for everybody, man. Our employees, we can't, they're getting benefits that we could only dream about giving them.
Right.
And so it was great. And so from that standpoint, I've learned a ton, and I'm really grateful for that I was part of that experience. I'd say the flip side for us, I'd say there's a big difference between managing a massive business and building a small one. And those two do not, they do not,
Oil and water.
oil and water, man. It's a different head. We're very much our brand is still really, really young, and trying to put a big brand approach to it of, invest in awareness of this brand certainly was there. But if you can't find the beer, if it's not available to everyone without doing too much work, it's all for nothing. And that's the piece that was always missing is we could never get enough penetration in the market to make it sense for them and make sense for us. And that's a grinded out business, And we were up for that, and could never get the focus to really build, to get that going. So that's where I just feel like, okay, we're too small for them. They're too big for us. And you can just kind of see it as it really, by the time we were on board, July of 18, by September of 18, the Ballast Point team was gone. So they stripped the sales team out, and then everything was left to the import team to go sell. And so at that point, it's like, okay, 50,000 cases or 100,000 cases is significant to us when they've got this hot brand that they could probably pick up the phone and call. Hey, would you take a pallet of beer for every location? And it's done, right? It's just a different head, man. So I get it.
Yeah.
If I was on their side of the business, I'd make the same damn decision. But they're just when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, look, they've got the hot hand, and they're gonna play the hot hand, and I would do the same thing. So it's a matter of the circumstances worked out that way.
Yeah, that's really, so there's an interesting parallel, or the one that occurs to me. I spoke with years ago, this wasn't even for a podcast episode, but I was reporting out a piece, and I spoke with Tim Schoen, who was at Anheuser-Busch pre-InBev in the late 90s when they were building out, they had like faux craft brands that they tried to do before they decided to acquire craft brands. They had like, Tequiza was sort of its own separate beast. But they had like Elk Mountain, they had Sierra Ridge or something, Pacific Ridge or something like that. Whatever. Tim was on those things, and they never really went anywhere. The beer was fine. Anheuser-Busch knew how to brew beer, and they brought Mitch Steele in, who we just had on to talk about, the Skunk Works sort of operation that they developed to try to sort of imitate craft beers. The liquid was good, but the interest was never there with Anheuser-Busch. And part of that was because Augie Busch the third, everyone calls him the chief or Three Sticks or whatever. He thought it wasn't, he looked down on it a little bit and was annoyed to have to deal with it, or at least that's what the reporting shows from the time. But the other reason, which Tim touched on, is like, well, Bud Light was on a fucking rocket ship. There was no oxygen for anyone. Why would you bother or try to sell this stuff, dink and dive with, 25,000 cases here, 50,000 cases there? Like, who gives a shit, man? Put Bud Light in every supermarket in the country. We're doing pallet drops for as much, as much volume in a week as this brand, as these little small brands sell in a year. They could never get the incentives right, even within their own sales force, and then forget about it in the middle tier. They're also telling those guys they want 100% share of mind for the big brand. So there's an interesting parallel. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. It sounds like something at least somewhat similar was afoot in Constellation brands a couple decades later. I mean, as you say, the hot hand, these brands are on fire, but fire, takes oxygen, and that means that someone else is maybe starved of it a little bit. It sounds like maybe Four Corners didn't get the attention that it needed.
And it's attention. And again, look, we were doing, a couple 100,000 cases, right? They were doing 400 million. So, You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
okay, so from a
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
energy standpoint, you're going to get the same percentage of what you're, what you're contributing. And,
Right.
I didn't, I didn't tell them to put the deal together. They did it on their own.
Yeah.
But, and frankly, the people who put the deal together weren't even in the business the year after we did it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So,
Was there, what was the cultural, like the corporate culture, such as you experienced it? I mean, obviously you're operating within this business. You're not in
yeah.
Western New York. You're in Dallas. So like you don't see it day to day, but you obviously interface with these people. Ballast Point would go on to be, depending on how you look at it. I mean, I think most people look at it as a gaffe or as an overspend. It was the high watermark of sort of the frothiest part of the market, right?
Yeah.
Like this
we
was
did not get paid $1 billion. I can tell you that.
well, damn. I assume if you did, you wouldn't bother doing podcasts. We appreciate you on, but
exactly.
I wouldn't take it as an offense if you chose not to at that point. Why bother? But Ballast Point would come unraveled, and by 2019 they would sell it off to Kings and Convicts, which is this it emerged as kind of a little bit of a I don't know, bargain bin. I don't even know what to call them. They're a brewing company, I suppose.
Yeah.
They did a little bit of what Tilray Brands is doing now.
Yeah,
which is just anyone who has buyer's remorse, hey, we'll take it. We'll take it off your hands for pennies on the dollar. But I'm curious, like, did you detect a shift in the corporate culture at Constellation? You come in June 2018. They've got this hot brand in Modelo. Did you feel buyer's remorse? Like, did you detect a shift? I mean, at some point they thought the deal was a good one to do, and they paid real money for Four Corners. And then at some point, obviously, like they started either explicitly or implicitly deprioritizing it. When did that shift happen? Do you remember noticing
within
it?
6 months. Within 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, they had
Wow.
they have they have a conference in the fall that kicks off, here's all the new items, and then it really kind of gets a lot of energy. So, and they had go into that meeting into September. We've only been in the house for 4 months, and so I'm pretty excited about it. So, okay, great. And we were the shiny new toy in the thing, and it was actually here. It was like the conference was actually in Dallas, so it was my backyard. And so, it had good energy. But what had happened is, I think it was weeks prior to that, they had slashed the Ballast Point team,
Right.
And then there's a lot of just oddities around. No one's really and the folks who had put the deal together really got excited about it. Weren't around. They were on their last assignments on M&As and blah blah blah. So we were kind of left with like, okay, I'm not sure where this leaves us. And then by the time we got to January of 19, or I'm sorry, February, January of 19, then the whole discussion around Ballast Point going away, and I was like, okay, now we're really in a lurch here. And just seeing these other brands take off and deprioritized, but I understand it at the same time.
Even if you don't cast moral judgment on it, though, it sounds like there was a palpable shift, and it happened quick.
But for us, corporately, it's a corporate culture, and it's a great company. Amazing company. They treat their employees extremely well, but it's a corporate culture, which for me I found really it's like it was just limiting on what we could do, how quick we could do it, decisions to be made, who all is involved with decisions on these it's got to hit certain margin targets, it's got to do this, and it's like, man, you guys understand we don't operate out of the largest brewing facility on the planet. So,
right.
There's a different margin discussion to be had.
Right. Or what you're talking about is economies of scale. You're right. You're surely smart enough to understand economies of scale, guys. We don't have them.
So just the ability to move as fast as we needed to move, especially competing against other, I'd say those years, the 17 to, the 18, might call it 17, 18, those 5 years was the gold rush. It's like, okay, you've got to go out and really penetrate the market, and and if not, then you just got to get the critical mass. And I think we're trying. We're focused on fewer things and trying to drive those versus like really solidifying the brand across the state. So that was just circumstances that fell together at that time. But that's it's definitely a corporate culture, and interesting people all over the place. So really, some good folks in that company. But when it comes down to focus on this brand, they would have, we call it impact SKUs is what they would call them. And so they go into a buyer, call it whatever, Walmart, Kroger, any one of them. And there's a pecking order. Very top of that list is Modelo 24s, Modelo 18s.
Sure.
On and on and on. We'd have one, and it'd probably fall number 14, 15 on the list if you ever got to it. So,
oh boy.
Again, it's volume for value, and and so that was just it. It's like, okay, too big for us, we're too small for them, and it just became a distraction at after a while. It felt like a distraction, and
that's no fun.
No, it's not fun. It's just I just never, out of all the sets of going into the thing, if I think about out of my sets of challenges, getting attention internally was never one that was on my list, and it became the very top challenge, that the biggest challenge I had.
Indulge us. I know we're a couple minutes over, George, but can we hang on to you for just a couple more minutes? Is that all right?
Yeah, right on.
So, we've talked through the deal, and you said it looked good on paper, and we've talked through why it, maybe didn't work out the way either side had hoped. But as I mentioned earlier, you always had the opportunity to walk away. I mean, I'm assuming you got paid at least some of it up front. I'm sure it might have been structured that there were performance goals or whatever, but like you could have moved on and made Four Corners a chapter of your life that you closed or that you turned the page on. You decided not to do that. And we talked a little bit about this, and it does seem, like I said earlier, I mean, it seems validating towards your belief in the brand. But as we said, the market for craft beer had shifted tremendously over the course of the 5-year period that you were attached to the Constellation mothership. When you were deciding what to do, why did you decide to take the brand back? Why did you guys, decide to move forward with it once again on your own?
A couple of reasons. One, I think we still believe in the brand, obviously, and still believe in. But then, the purpose of the brand was really built around, okay, let's in and around our community, and really spreading that, sharing our story with others, and and so I don't know that we had ever fulfilled that vision, and so there's still an opportunity to do that, and maybe at a different scale, but that's the opportunity, and so. And then partly is, I don't know, we've had this discussion as we talk with other brewers and just kind of look around. It's like brewers are probably the most stubborn people on the fucking planet.
Well, you're talking to a journalist, so similar levels of stubbornness here.
Exactly, man. So but no, it was a hard decision. Wasn't a hard decision. I think for me, it's like there was, the brand was going to be sold. And Constellation preferred that, and the offer was, hey, we'd like for the original co-founders to have to take this thing back if that's something you guys would like to do. We had a
so that was their idea.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that reflects well on them, at least. Yeah.
They were done. No, they were done with craft. I mean, it's clear after Ballast, there's like, okay, what are we doing here? So they sold us and Funky Buddha, the Funky. Took the brothers took the brands back as well.
Yep.
And so it all good. And I don't know, for me, it was like, okay, if this thing's going to die, I will kill it. I'd hate to see it just go off to somebody else and just kind of wither and get a stuff. It's like, no, let's bring it back home and, whatever we need to do. But yeah, so I say that half jokingly, but it's like, no, this is our brand, and we're going to nurture it and do what we can. And it's challenged. So we're up for that challenge, and so here we are, 1 year ish into a little over a year from getting the brands back. And it was a lot. It was much more disruptive than I thought it was going to be, because it's just part of the thing with when we have these brands with Constellation, you have these key account managers that are managing the business. So, the conversations and, that I had as an independent brewer prior to the acquisition is like, okay, I feel I have a relationship of some sort, direct contact with, some of the, most powerful beer buyers in Texas and that sort of thing. And I lost that. We weren't sitting at the table when these conversations were happening, and they were going through a key account manager. So, that goes away. So you draw points of distribution,
Sure.
So it's really kind of getting back to the table and building the business around, for the scale that we have. We leveled up with everything else Constellation, and that's a significant decrease in resources when we take it back. So that spent a whole year just kind of getting that together, redoing our distributor network. Went from 13 distributors down to 7.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of consolidation there, and really just trying to figure out, okay, who's with us? Who, we have a lot of people that are influential to the business. Who's with us, and figuring that part out. So I think we got that figured out. So really start moving forward into 25. We're having good conversations with some key distributors and key retailers. So off we go. But and just a different landscape. So it's been a hell of a ride. I mean, you think about where we started the conversation is, hey, we're playing in bands, drinking beer, and kind of
at the flying saucer,
flying saucer, and brewing beer, and it's a beer journey. It's a real journey, and I just the one thing I've learned in this process is kind of just if you put your intent out there, and the doors will open, and so there's faith in that, and I do believe that's just. Yeah, if you don't have faith in that, then you don't need to be an entrepreneur. It's just too challenging.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a great place to leave it. George, thank you so much for taking not just me, but all of our Taplines listeners on this beer journey, as you call it. I mean, you've had an experience that very, very few craft brewers have ever had. You went into the belly of the beast, might be putting it a little harshly for your former partners in Constellation, or for your former owner in Constellation, but you lived to tell the tale. You came back. The whale spat you out, so to speak, and now you're going it alone again. And we wish you the best of luck, George. Thank you so much for joining on Taplines. You're welcome back anytime, my man.
Thank you, Dave. And if you're ever in town, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to host you or anyone else over at the tap room. And
careful what you promise, man. We got a lot of listeners, a lot of podcast listeners.
Come on down, and we'd love to host you.
Very good. All right, George, take care.
Right on. Thanks.
Taplines is recorded in Richmond, Virginia, and produced by yours truly and Darby Seaside, who, along with the talented Shane Farrick, composed our delightful soundtrack. Just listen to it. I also want to give a quick shout out to the entire VinePair team, and especially co-founders Adam Teeter and Josh Mallon, editor-in-chief Joanna Sherino, managing editor Tim McCurdy, and art director Danielle Grinberg, who designed our lovely Taplines logo. And of course, a big thank you to you, yes, you listener, for spending time with us week in and week out. We literally couldn't do this without you. I'm Dave Infante, and I'll catch you next time.